Hi everybody, happy Wednesday. My name is Elise and welcome to my tea table. I'm streaming from the school bus today. And that's because we're going to be talking about school transportation. This Wednesday, as like every other Wednesday, I come onto my stream and we discuss the Constitution. We've been doing this for over a year now. It's incredible that we're still going and we're still finding topics to look at. Of course, we really aren't directly studying the Constitution anymore. That only took us actually a few months to make it through the entire Constitution as far as reading it. But now we're looking at like modern issues and understanding the constitutionality of that. Today's topic is on school desegregation, and the reason why I am broadcasting from a school bus is because in our latest 2021 budget bill, which was signed in law by our president earlier this year. This is the 2021 Omnibus Appropriations Bill, which addresses pretty much our entire budget. I actually went over this bill, I think 3 weeks ago during the Constitution Study Group. There's so many things that are addressed in this bill. Again, this is the entire budget for our federal government for the year. And in the education department, there is something in there about how it eliminates the prohibition of using funding for school desegregation efforts. Especially around transportation to be a part of school desegregation. So desegregation is something that I learned in school happening in the 1960s and 1970s. Something that like I remember whenever I was in like elementary school in the 80s in the South was still like a relevant thing, but turns out it is obviously still a relevant thing if our federal government is addressing it as part of our current year's budget. So we will be looking at several different articles. I did find some academic articles looking at like modern desegregation efforts. I don't know if it's exactly in alignment with what I was wanting to search today, but again, what usually happens with these Constitution study groups is it kind of goes off onto its own direction of like what we study and what we learn about. So we'll have to see where this goes. If you have any thoughts or ideas, questions about anything that we're talking about today, please speak up. This is an interactive co-learning experience. I am not a teacher. I definitely am not a civics teacher or civics expert. But the thing that's funny about civics is that civics and being civilized is simply our capacity for politeness. And I feel like I know something about that. I think that we all know something about that. So this is a space for all of us. This is a space for everybody, for us to share ideas, to learn together. Sorry. If you have any questions and would like to participate in the discussion, please just put them in the chat. I'd be more than happy to have the conversation with you here. I am streaming across several different platforms, so I can't really share screens with anybody today. Before I get into reading these articles, I am going to drink some tea first, because first and foremost, this is a tea channel. I stream about tea. I talk about tea. I'm a tea importer. I work with small independent family farms around the world and distribute their teas to small to medium-sized tea businesses here in the US, as well as in Europe, South America, and even in Asia as well. I'm based in fabulous Las Vegas, Nevada. So if you're ever in Las Vegas and you are interested in tea, or you're interested in any of the topics that I speak on this platform, feel free to reach out to me. I am always happy to make new friends, welcome new people into my tea room, and into this amazing lifestyle of tea drinking. All right, so my water is hot now. I'm ready to get into some tea drinking. Ready. Let's see. So just gonna prime all my wares, first starting out by pouring this freshly boiled hot water into all my tea wares, starting with, ooh, that was sticky. Starting with my gaiwan here. This is called a gaiwan. This is the quintessential tea brewing vessel. It's just a cup with a lid. You use that lid to hold back the leaf and decant the tea for your enjoyment. This is my pitcher. And the tea that we'll be drinking today is actually a tea that I was drinking yesterday. It is a blend of two different teas, two different Darjeeling teas. These are both a second flush 2018 Darjeeling tea. So it's not necessarily dry like how you would see it in the package. It has been infused once and ready for us to enjoy again. Oh, something going on with my music today. I'm gonna change up the music. Sometimes like my video player, maybe I just need to. All of the beats on this channel are provided by our good friend Sojourner. We're going to take a break from your music today, and we're going to listen. You know what? We're going to listen to some band music because you know we're talking about schools today, education, public education. Let's listen to some. Oh, sorry about that. Fast forward the song forward too much. We'll enjoy this. This will be nice. Alright, so I got my tea in the gaiwan ready to add my water to infuse it. Now, I'm very happy to show you all my favorite new teaware. I just went to go pick it up. It's this beauty here. This is my new tea display dish that you'll be seeing on stream. This is something that I painted, and my friends actually opened up a pottery painting business in Town Square here in Las Vegas. They have all of these blank ceramic pieces that you then just paint. So all this painting I did there in their studio, and then they will glaze and fire it for you. So I thought this was kind of funny. This is a cool display dish for the tea. You know, and just in general, a cool thing to have. Here's the tea. Here's the tea. So this is something I can use when it's time to gossip. When it's time to gossip, when it's time to spill the tea. See, so I just use the lid to hold back the tea leaf so that I can do a good decanting on it. Yeah. Might as well drink this one. This was just the hot water that I had put in earlier. And this is my tea. How nice it is. Nice looking tea. Beautiful color. Nice and clean. I mean, there's a little bit of the leaf specks in there, but it's organic, so it's okay if you end up eating some of it. All right, so let's spill the tea. Let's get into it. I know we're going to have a lot to talk about today, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about the T. So first and foremost, this is the article that I had reviewed with you all 3 weeks ago during our Constitution study group, just looking over all of the details of this Omnibus Appropriations Bill, which did include, this is what included the most recent COVID relief stimulus information that most recently passed. So bundled up with all of this was a lot of different new laws and budgets for all these different areas. So agriculture, commerce, defense, education, all of these things. And there was great detail. It took us a couple hours to move through all of these different details. But this was the one in the education section. And then on the legislative add-on, so these are like the new laws that were included with this bill. It says here, eliminates prohibition on using federal funds for transportation costs to carry out school desegregation efforts. I'll read that again. Eliminates prohibition on using federal funds for transportation costs to carry out school desegregation efforts. And so that made me question, and if you were there on that Constitution study group a few weeks ago, you would have remembered that, I was really curious about that. You know, like, is school desegregation still, like, a thing? And obviously it is, if our laws are still addressing it. And then it made me remember some recent conversations that I've had with friends, people I know, and it wasn't called desegregation directly. I don't know. I think in our research today we'll find out some other kind of common terms that are used to describe these efforts, these modern efforts of integrating our schools, of desegregating our schools, and in these conversations that I've had, I was very surprised to see the outcome, the consequence of what these efforts do. Because what happens is, if you're not going to be discriminating one person, if you don't really address the issue and you just try to do something to cover it up and make it better, someone else may end up feeling discriminated. And this happened in the case of this conversation where their child was rejected from a high-performance high school because they did not meet the diversity quota that this school was seeking. And this is mandated diversity quotas provided by the local government. I think that's like the local county government. And I've ended up having this conversation a few other times with other people, and it's just really surprising that this tends to be a prevalent thing. And it's no surprise that the people that are feeling this resentment and are feeling like they're discriminated are white people, because this is like affirmative action. This is like trying to force something to happen. And so, I'm not going to go into great detail about the racial issues on it. I mean, of course, this is an issue about race, but about, the white discrimination that people are feeling, because everybody's feelings are valid. And that's why I'm having this conversation, to try to get to the bottom of this and understand the validity of these feelings, where they're coming from. But most importantly, the purpose of today's study is to really kind of understand like the modern phenomenon of school desegregation. Not really talking too much about the consequences of it. I know this is a controversial subject, and I do welcome, as always, people's comments, questions, so bring them. I don't have too many rules here. Of course, being civilized, which again means our capacity for politeness. So be polite, be considerate of other people's feelings, and we do hold people accountable when they do not follow those rules. You will not be kicked out unless you show your inability to hold yourself accountable for that. So if you have a question or a comment, please just bring it up and we will deal with it after that. One place that I do not have a lot of leeway and flexibility in the rules is when you sexualize me. Oh, that's interesting. That's why the music keeps cutting out. I wonder if I play this music again, it'll be back. No, it's not back. I have to turn the music back on. Well, this tea is making me warm. You know, it's interesting about tea, and it's not just tea, it's lots of things that can affect, you know, your body's chemistry, your body's balance. I want to start that track all over. Yeah, this tea is making me warm. A tea that will make you cool, though, is green tea. I don't have any green tea. That Darjeeling tea, I needed to drink it right now, so that's why I chose to drink it. Maybe I'll just drink some water, that'll help it out. It is starting to get warm here in Vegas. I believe that we're at like 95 degrees today. We've already broken 100 at some point last week. That was a hot day. That was Friday, actually. That was like, my crew and I were doing a lot of hard work on that day. All right, so let's move on. All right, so the first article I guess we can look at is this NPR article. You know, NPR tends to be like one of the news sources that I favor when I do these like studies, or I mean pretty much all of our content. Like when I want to visit an article and try to understand something from a more skilled perspective, because again, this is a co-learning experience. I am not an expert in this subject. Like, I am learning just as much as you are learning. I, you know, just have a lot of experiences with the work that I do and the interests that I have. I get to have a lot of very interesting conversations with people. So a lot of times, those conversations are what prompts, you know, the subjects that we end up studying during these times, these streams. So this is an article from NPR titled "Why U.S. Schools Are Still Segregated and One Idea to Help Change That." So this is not really going to be talking too much about specifically, you know, transportation around desegregation efforts, but I figured that this could be kind of a good article for us to start with, to kind of understand the current setting for segregation in our school systems and our communities here in the U.S. So it says, in 1954, the Supreme Court ruled in Brown versus Board of Education that racial segregation in schools was unconstitutional. The decision is often framed as a landmark decision that transformed education for Black students, allowed them equal access to integrated classrooms. But more than 6 decades later, segregation in American schools is still very much a reality, says Rebecca Shabilia, founder of EdBuild, a nonprofit that investigated school funding inequalities in America. Her team found that predominantly white school districts get collectively $23 billion more per year than predominantly non-white school districts. That's because of another important but less studied Supreme Court case, Milliken versus Bradley in 1974. In Milliken, the Supreme Court ruled that if a school district line is drawn anywhere for almost any reason, Sibilia says, desegregation doesn't have to cross that border. I'm going to read that again because I want to make sure we understand that clearly. Bitcoin, do you want to come say hi and hang out? Bitcoin wants to study with us. This is Bitcoin. He's a cutie. He's a cutie boy. know you're going to want to come and cuddle in. That's okay. You do what you want. I'm just reading. Okay, so it says, in Milliken, the Supreme Court ruled that if a school district line is drawn anywhere for almost any reason, desegregation doesn't have to cross that border. It ultimately had the effect on, in essence, reversing a lot of the impact of Brown, Sibilia says, and entrenched the power of the school district border in desegregation efforts. This created a system of fractured communities and a fractured system of education funding. That means even today, only about a half of America's 50 million public school students attend integrated schools. The other half are enrolled in predominantly white or predominantly non-white school districts, she says. And when you get to And when you get to 75, 85% white or non-white, really desegregation can't be meaningfully achieved. Here's an excerpt from the interview with this woman on All Things Considered, which is an NPR show. Hey guys. So let's talk about the mechanics of how resources also don't get distributed equally among school districts. Can you explain the basics of how we fund our public schools? Property tax and locally raised taxes make up about half of all education funding. In the state that tries to make up the difference between what local communities can raise, what we find is that even though the states make valiant efforts to do so, they consistently fall short. What alternative funding models would be more equitable than funneling local taxes into school districts? Bitcoin, you're nosy today, huh? You're being a nosy. You're blocking the view. No one can see us. Can you sit? Be a good boy. Property taxes and locally raised taxes. Oh, okay, let's see. Funding education through property taxes is not a bad thing. It's actually a very good thing. Property taxes tend to be the most stable of all of our revenue sources, and that's certainly going to show itself over the next few years where state economies are going to be really hurt by this pandemic. So fixing the problem means allowing property taxes to escape the border in essence. So these properties that have, or these borders that have become unmalleable because of that Milliken versus, hey Grandmaster Allen, good to see you, welcome to the stream, thanks for saying hi. We're doing a Constitution study group today. We're talking about school desegregation, which turns out is still a thing. It's still a modern thing. Just specifically looking at this, this is part of the latest budget bill that was passed by our federal government earlier this year and signed by our president. And there was something fishy in there. I shouldn't say fishy. It was just, I'm doing really good. There was something a little questionable in this bill in the education section that said this is a new law now, which means prior to this was not law. It says eliminates prohibition on using federal funds for transportation costs to carry out school desegregation efforts. So the fact that this is written in our current federal laws means that prior to this, there was an issue with various states or local governments that were prohibiting the use of federal funds to carry out school desegregation efforts. And so I'm just doing a little bit of a lit review research on the current situation with school desegregation and potentially kind of looking into like what are some of the unknown consequences of this, because I have seen it. Look at that cute dog. He's so cute. Taking a nap. I want to show you something cool I just got. I'm doing really well. I am. It's getting a little hot here, but I'm doing well. This is my new teaware I just got. It's my tea display dish. And I just love it. It's so cool. Bitcoin, you got something to say? Look here. You got something to say? I should really invert my camera so that way it's easier to get him to do that. Make it look legit. So yeah, we're talking about the public school system today and efforts around desegregation. So I'm just finishing this first article talking about like why desegregation is still important for like disadvantaged communities, because there's like an inequality of the distribution of funds to schools. And this interview, this is on NPR, this woman was saying that one of the major sources, what was the actual property taxes and locally raised taxes make up about half of all education funding. So this is just kind of like setting a foundation of understanding that the reason why maybe like predominantly white communities versus other communities do get more funding to their schools is because there's higher property taxes. And so this kind of gives a foundation to understand outside of how education can be better distributed to students, various students from various communities, disadvantaged communities or not, is through desegregation, which means, yeah, you would need to like transport students from one place to another so that they can get to the schools that they need to be getting to. And we're listening to band music, marching band music. So we'll just finish this article. We've conflated this idea of local funding and local control of schools, but we need to do it is start to separate those concepts. Just because you're running your own schools and governing your own schools doesn't necessarily mean that you get to keep all of your money. What we've put together in one of our final ed build reports is the idea that maybe we can actually be busing dollars across a school district border, even if we don't bus kids across it. Aha! There it is. It would serve to smooth out these wealth disparities that we see coming from very fractured property tax bases and allow for a much more even start to our school funding system. So right here, bus the kids across it. So this is what this law right here that our president just signed into is addressing. That is that like you should be able to use federal funds to transport students for these desegregation efforts. And this is kind of cool to see. This woman that was interviewed here is from a nonprofit called EdBuild, and she was interviewed on NPR, but this was in 2020. So this is pretty relevant just from last year. So the current solution right here, you see right here, she says at the very end, the current solution of how we're bringing more equality to, the value of education to people from potentially disadvantaged communities is by busing them to more affluent communities where the schools have more money, because the schools are able to collect, or the local governments there are able to collect more property taxes. Is the biggest thing, is the property taxes is the main thing that's supporting the higher level of funding for the schools. And so this woman is proposing that they should be actually redistributing the money versus redistributing the students, which I think is a big deal, because I've had a couple of conversations over the past few months. So this is relevant, and there was a lot of emotion and a lot of heat behind these conversations because white students are being denied access to high performance schools because they don't meet a certain diversity quota that those schools are mandated to keep. Now, this is not happening all over the country. This is happening in specific places. And so then those white students feel like they're being oppressed. It's like the school is physically closer to them. All of the classmates that got into school are classmates that they've already been going to school for years with, but just because they're white and they don't meet the diversity quota that school is trying to keep, then they are rejected, and they feel rejected, and they feel oppressed. And no one should feel oppressed, even white people. Like, no one should feel that way. And so this is an interesting concept that this woman is saying here. Hey, homies for nomies, good to see you. Thanks for coming by and saying hello. Thanks for coming by. Thanks for being here. I hope you're having a beautiful Wednesday. want to show you my new toy, my new teaware. I've got new teaware on my table. My new display dish. This is ceramic. I painted this. My friend has a new business. A cool little shop where you go in and they have all these like blank. Oh, it looks like Bitcoin's sharing some gossip with us. What are you saying, Bitcoin? What do you got to say to me? Oh, this is my tea display dish now, which is kind of cool. I like it. I like it. All right, so I got another article for us. Homies, how you been? How you been feeling? All right, so this is from Hastings Constitutional Law Quarter. So now we're going to get into something a bit more academic than what we've been looking at. I'll tell you what, the marching band in my high school wasn't playing music this groovy. So this is from the fall of 2020, so also very relevant. I wanted to make sure, because like if you look online through both academic articles and news articles, a lot of the conversation around school desegregation is from, you know, like the 1960s, the 1970s, and I'm really curious more about like the modern issues around it. So exclusionary zoning, school segregation, and housing segregation, an investigation into a modern desegregation case and solutions to housing segregation. So, you know, I don't know if this is going to give us too much looking into like schools specifically. I think this has a little bit more to do with housing. But I figured it would be useful for us to look at all the same. Yeah, no one should ever feel oppressed. Right, Bitcoin? No one should ever feel oppressed. Everybody should always feel empowered. How do we do that? Oh, cool. Awesome. Are you going to be streaming? If you're streaming, when I start up, I'll raid you. I don't know if I'll have anybody. I don't get a lot of people that hang out with my Constitution study group because it's a little bit dry. Sometimes I get some people that stick around and hang out, but I'm trying to keep it flowing, trying to keep it going. Definitely, yeah, my high school band did not play music this cool. The Constitution of the United States makes broad claims at equality, yet this nation is far from achieving this idealistic goal. This country was founded on a segregated society. It treated everyone who was not white as an outsider, not entitled to the same privileges as white men. Even after the Civil War concluded and slavery was outlawed, communities across the nation continued to be the product of self-segregation and further government-sponsored segregation. These practices have affected every aspect of life in the United States. Moreover, these tactics were deliberately used to prevent minorities from gaining equality in housing and subsequently in educational opportunities. While these private and government-sponsored tactics were not explicitly labeled as de jure segregation or Jim Crow laws, they were used throughout the nation as a method to further the idea that whites were superior to others. Although California was founded as a free state and did not engage in de jure segregation following the Civil War, efforts to separate communities on the basis of race persisted. The results of these segregationist efforts endured to this day and are particularly pronounced in the intersection between housing and schools. Historically, minorities were unable to buy homes in the same neighborhoods as whites, limiting the schools minority children could attend. As a result, this impacted children for the rest of their lives, determining which jobs they could hold, where they could live, and importantly, the opportunities available to future generations. Even today, isolated communities are still part of American society, and segregated schools are not just a feature of the past. Oh, homies, you have an internet issue as well? I have a terrible internet issue. I can't get over it. We only have one internet provider available in my area here, and I pay for a certain level, and that company has never been able to deliver what I pay for. And so then I switched to 5G, and I have this new system that will like merge different internet connections together, and so that's been able to like bring some stability to my stream. But it's like I have to pay for all these different data connections, and it's just ridiculous. I'm just like, I'm waiting for the mobile Starlink. I hope that works. I don't know. I have a lot of hope in that Starlink. Mr. Musk, please help us out with good internet. Please, please, please. Homies, is this like, you have children, so like, are your children homeschooled? Do they go to public school? And if they go to public school, or even if they don't go to public school, do you hear among, your parent group's conversation around, schooling and like the busing of students from one district to another to like empower this desegregation? Yeah, it's hard. When you're a streamer, you have to have solid internet. There's no choice. You have to have it. So this note will explore the history of housing segregation, including exclusionary zoning ordinance, private real estate tactics, and federal programs that created modern segregation neighborhoods and communities. So the fact that we created those neighborhoods and communities is what has created the issue with our school funding, right? So the last article that we looked at explained that part of it. So now here we'll learn about how those housing borders got created, how these communities, these segregated communities, got created in the first place. This note will examine California's history of school segregation, including analyzing the connection between the passage of Proposition 13 and greater disparity within California school districts. Next, it will investigate a recent desegregation case, People ex rel Becerra versus Sausalito Marin City School District, where the California Attorney General ordered the Sausalito Marin City School District to desegregate. The note then delves into the history of Marin County City and how the zoning ordinance, federal programs, and private real estate tactics purposefully segregated Marin City from the rest of the county and culminated in the Attorney General's desegregation order. Lastly, this note will explore solutions to resolve housing segregation in communities like Marin City. Toward the end of the 19th century, many municipalities in the United States enacted zoning ordinances to separate white residents from non-white residents. The earliest zoning ordinances were relatively benign height regulations, but after the short period of time, cities began enacting zoning ordinances for other purposes. For example, Los Angeles adopted the nation's first zoning ordinance to protect residential areas from industrial nuisances. Many state legislatures upheld zoning ordinance, citing the need to plan for the general welfare of a community under local control. Isn't it crazy that like people are still like dealing with this? That like, we feel like we're in such like an evolved country, evolved democracy, and there's plenty of people that claim that racism doesn't exist, like so many people, yet here it is right here. And like, inevitably with this problem, instead of really addressing this problem, what it's creating is this like space for people to feel of reverse racism. Like, that is so crazy. Like, someone that's going to be rejected from a school because they don't meet the diversity quota that the school has to hit in order to get their funding, in order for them to be compliant with the local government. So then you have a bunch of white people feeling like they're oppressed, and they're they're facing reverse racism. And it's like, boy, are we not solving this problem, like, at all. As zoning ordinance gained popularity, municipalities began using ordinance to further racial segregation. As early as 1916, the Supreme Court struck down a local ordinance prohibiting the sale of property to a black person in Buchanan versus Warley. In Buchanan, the zoning ordinance in question made it unlawful for any colored person to move into and occupy a residence on the same block where a majority of the residents were occupied by white people. So, like, this kind of shit is not directly happening anymore. What we're facing now is, like, the consequences of it, the aftermath of that segregation. Because a lot of these communities, like, once the zoning started and these communities started, like, it just persists. Despite the Supreme Court's holding in Buchanan, local municipalities continued to draft ordinance segregating on the basis of race. Racially restrictive zoning began in the South as a social control mechanism for blacks and other undesirables. Racial zoning practices in northern and western cities functioned as a response to the Great Migration, where southern blacks arrived in northern and western cities in great numbers in search of job opportunities and to escape legally enforced Jim Crow discrimination and persecution in the South. After Buchanan, cities fashioned legally defensible racial zoning systems by using professional planners to prepare racial zoning plans and to marshal the entire planning process to create and completely separate black community. The Supreme Court's decision in Village of Euclid versus Ambler Realty Corporation in 1926 upheld municipal zoning as a valid form of state police power. Following this decision, zoning ordinances were institutionalized by municipalities throughout the nation, thereby giving municipalities carte blanche to use zoning in an exclusionary manner using the guise of local control. All right, we got it. I don't really want to talk about this anymore. I'm going to move on to the next thing. Let's talk about, we get it. All right, I get it. It makes me, like, frustrated. I didn't come on here to talk about housing zoning. I came on here to talk about school desegregation. So, but now, like, that was important to look at that and kind of understand the foundation of why we have segregated communities in the first place. Like, outside of, like, other systemic issues that, keep certain communities the way that they are, separated the way they are. Like, these are, like, actual laws. These are, like, the government systems that not only supported it, but, like, initiated it. So I'm going to move on to, like, when we started to focus on desegregation. So this is all still on segregation. Oh, let's look at it. So on June 6, 1978, California voters passed Proposition 13, reducing property taxes on homes, businesses, and farms. Additionally, Proposition 13 froze the tax rate at 1976 values, and tax increases were limited to no more than 2% per year so long as the property was not sold. Although the passage and adoption of Proposition 13 was controversial, both the California Supreme Court and the United States Supreme Court upheld its constitutionality. Proposition 13 had a deeply affected California education system. Prior to Prop 13, local preferences determined how much funding a school received. The California Supreme Court held in Serrano versus Priest that funding schools by local property taxes violated the state's constitution because differences in taxes from one school community to another generated gross inequalities in funding per student. Following the Serrano decision and the enactment of Prop 13, decisions over how to fund the schools and educate and evaluate students shifted to state policymakers in Sacramento. As a result, the decimated tax rate, state property tax revenue dropped drastically, annihilating the amount of money available to schools at the local level. California has recently made changes to the way K-12 education is financed. In 2013, California passed a local controlled funding formula that provided more per pupil funding for low income and English learning students, directing more revenue to districts where higher shares of low income students and English learners than it will be wealthier students. The Public Policy Institute of California argued that LCFF will not be as effective as intended because it is received on the district level rather than the individual school level, prompting concerns about intra-district resource equality. Prop 13 results in schools not being adequately funded since the schools are now no longer locally controlled and instead are controlled by Sacramento. Some argue that Prop 13 makes it increasingly difficult to raise money for schools on the local level. The Public Policy Institute of California reported that in 2018 to 19, the California public schools received a total of $97.2 billion in funding from three sources: the state, property taxes and other local sources, and the federal government, 9% only. The Public Policy Institute of California also estimates that in 2011, private fundraising and voluntary contributions to school districts accounted for $547 million. Unsurprisingly, wealthier school districts generate more money than poorer districts in 2011. Those school districts that can generate more private donations also receive and generate more property taxes and are therefore able to fund their school districts beyond the minimum level without state assistance. This creates funding disparities between districts. However, resources can also be distributed unequally within a school district. For example, a school located in a wealthier neighborhood has the capacity to fundraise more than a school within the same district in a poorer neighborhood. This leads to intra-district funding disparities, meaning that a wealthier school within one district will have more resources than a poorer school in the same district. Schools located in the poor neighborhoods that receive less funding as a result of Prop 13 are also a direct outcome of exclusionary zoning measures and other school-sanctioned discriminatory measures discussed in Section 1 through 3. In contrast, schools that are able to generate funds beyond the state's limits are located in wealthier and largely whiter neighborhoods. California's centralized school funding, along with the purposeful housing segregation, has resulted in school districts like the Sausalito Marin City School District, where the district has, as a whole, is wealthy, yet not all schools within the district are provided with equal resources. So, yep, that's the consequence. Okay, so here's the case study. Your face getting caught, Bitcoin. You don't want to do that. Come on. Stay in frame. Be a good boy. Take a nap. Bitcoin got a bath today, so he's nice and clean. Hey, Brian. I'm in the school bus today. We're talking about desegregation in the schools, so lots of diversity in this bus, right? I'm learning a lot today. I'm surprised how much I'm learning. I'm very grateful for this. I'm very, very grateful. I'm listening to some very groovy marching band music. So much groovier than any marching band that I heard in high school. So Marin City is a product of various segregation techniques, and as a result, this unincorporated community has little in common with its wealthy neighbors. Marin City was one of the nation's first integrated communities during World War II, but shortly thereafter it became predominantly black with a significantly lower average income than its neighbors. I just thought this filter was so funny. I looked up school bus and this was the first filter that came up and I'm like, oh, this is so funny. I'm like, wee, we're going to school, wee. I know it's it's a little disorienting, but here, I'll change myself over. Oh no, that's not gonna do us anything. Let's do this. What should I do now? Is that better? Maybe I'll be a school fish. Oh, with money. Alright, I'll be money. And we're talking about money anyway. We're always talking about money. Jeez, always talking about money. The lack of a significantly lower average income than its neighbors. The lack of wealthy residents and the consequences of Prop 13 has left Marin City's schools with considerably few resources than the other schools in the same district. The dearth of resources at the Bayside MLK Junior Academy, a school located in Marin City, came under the California Attorney General's investigation and culminated in a desegregation settlement agreement between the state and school district in August 2019. So this is like super relevant. Brian says, can you imagine if all the sides of us could go to school in separate classes and then come back and upload? Yeah, and then share all of our experiences. Yeah, I don't know what the solution is, man. This is a deep, nasty problem. But the last article that I looked at, I really liked what that woman had to say, because her solution was it's not so much about physically desegregating, because that's what is currently happening, and results is kind of leading to even more racism and more oppression and more hate. But redistributing the funds, but of course the wealthier people that paid those property taxes to create that higher level of funding, they're not gonna like that. But we gotta do something, So I'm not gonna look at the history of the city. I know that would be interesting, but I'm gonna move on to the next section. Despite its racial diversity, Marin City schools still do not receive the same resources as the wealthy neighborhood schools in Sausalito due to the lack of income diversity. Marin City residents do not have the same income as wealthy and largely white Sausalito, meaning that Marin City parents cannot donate to the schools the same way as Sausalito parents. This creates intra-district resource inequality within the Sausalito-Marin City School District, discussed in Section 4. As an indirect result of both Prop 13 and the direct result of local zoning ordinance and other segregation tactics. On August 9, 2019, the California Attorney General, Becerra, and Sausalito Marin City School District reached a settlement agreement to desegregate its schools. The Attorney General's office accused the school district of intentionally creating a segregated school at Bayside Martin Luther King Jr. Academy in Marin City and violated state anti-discrimination laws. The Attorney General accused the Board of Trustees of deliberately diverting staff and resources away from Bayside MLK Jr. Academy to Willow Creek Academy, a charter school in mainly white Sausalito. The Attorney General found that the school district intentionally moved Black and Latinx students into an underperforming public school and ordered the school district to desegregate. Willow Creek prided itself on its diversity, but had a significantly higher white student makeup than Bayside MLK Junior School, which had a significantly higher Black student population. The Attorney General argued that the district starved Bayside of resources that Willow Creek had. For example, the Bayside MLK Jr. did not have a qualified math teacher while the Willow Creek did. Bayside only had a part-time counselor, while Willow Creek had a full-time counselor.
On Street Sounds Radio.
No, we're not gonna. Damn, I should have just put that one on loop. There were also reports that the school district as a whole punished Black and Latinx children more harshly than white students compared to any other public school in California. In order to give teeth to the settlement agreement, the Attorney General ordered the district superintendent to form a desegregation advisory group made up of students, parents, teachers, administrators, community organizations, and county organizations. The San Francisco Superior Court, responsible for overseeing the settlement agreement, ordered the advisory group to meet twice a year for the next 5 years to ensure that the desegregation goals are met. The court also ordered a community assessment of the implementation of comprehensive education program. The settlement agreement specified the percentages of children in the district to be enrolled in each school throughout the district, regardless of the student's background, to further meet the desegregation goals. Finally, the agreement required the establishment of a career and academic counseling program, a scholarship program, and summer support programs for students throughout the district. The Sausalito Marin City School District case demonstrated that school segregation is not a distant memory, but one that school districts still fight today. This case not only emphasizes that school districts are still segregated, but also demonstrates the effect of zoning on school districts. Marin City is a high outcome of segregation efforts dating back over 70 years, culminating in a community that is geographically, racially, and economically separated from the rest of Marin County. Isolated communities such as Marin City are bound to experience harm to their schools, even when shared with a school district that receives substantial funding from the otherwise wealthy surrounding community. Yeah, so that's it. Man, what a sticky problem. What a sticky problem. Brian, what do you think of this? You had kids. Did your kids go through public school? I like this woman though. I mean, of everything that we looked at today, I'm really stoked on this one lady. I want to look at their website actually. Their work. It's a nonprofit called Ed Build. And her proposal, what? You don't have a safe website? Come on. Was there ever any conversations or issues around segregation or desegregation? And did your children ever face discrimination based on that? Because that's what happens. When you do this affirmative action, when you try to force some type of desegregation or some type of betterment of the diversity without really understanding the underlying issues, or I'm sure they understand them, they just don't want to address them. A white student that's going to be rejected from a school because that school is trying to meet some type of diversity quota could actually create a whole lot of resentment and hate, and more resentment and hate, especially around racism. That student could, for the rest of their life, that white student for the rest of their life could look at color, people of color, and automatically have a prejudice from them just based from that experience. Nothing to do with all the rest of the systemic issues and cultural issues that we have around race, but just because they have that personal trauma of feeling rejected, of feeling like they're not good enough. And then, like, for the rest of their life say, oh, well, they're only there because of affirmative action. I hear that all the freaking time. And it's so stupid. It's so stupid that it's like that. Yeah, so this is their website. The school funding system is broken. There's always a way to fix it, and there are tools to guide you. EdBuild is an organization that worked to bring common sense and fairness to the way state-funded public schools. Here you can find EdBuild's work and learn about school funding problems and solutions. Ways to fix it. Let's look at that. Clean slate, common sense and fairness, frontier. So Clean Slate is the American public education system is plagued by deep funding inequalities. These divides are created by differences in local wealth, and they're often too wide to be bridged with state funds. We need a better solution. So common sense and fairness says, okay, here it says, so your oldest got pulled out of a great program that you loved. It was a desegregated school, bilingual. English speakers in English classes, in K to third learning Spanish. That's cool. They had the classes together. By 5th grade, hope was all students speaking both languages fluently. That's really cool. Was that part of, like, was that a specific program, or was that part of desegregation efforts? Like, was that, like, in a school, like, maybe here's my better question, like, when I say desegregation efforts, that's, like, a school that, like, before desegregation was located in a predominantly white, affluent neighborhood, and then changing to be desegregated and kind of moving some students from here to a different school, and then students from a different community, you know, diversity into the, you know, what was a predominantly white school. Or was it something else? Because that sounds interesting. State funding for formulas drive the distribution of education dollars, and they do much to determine whether funding is adequate, equitable, and supportive of student success. View EdBuild's model funding formula policies and use this interactive tool to build a state formula. So something that I've heard that some school districts are doing when they develop their desegregation strategy is that they require all the schools to maintain replicate the same diversity of that entire district within the school. Oh man, Brian, that's traumatic. Maybe offline, maybe the next time we see each other, Brian, I want to ask you more about that story. That's crazy. Yeah, there can be resentment in all directions. I think there's value in people from a common community going to school together. I think there's a lot of value in that. School district borders have power. They matter for school funding, home values, and diversity, and they can be drawn to either narrow or widen opportunity gaps. This 50-state survey of school district border law provides tools to address these borders and head on in pursuit of educational equity. All right, so this is called Frontier. Their web designer did not do a good job of making this very readable. Like, you can't read that at all. I'll read it for you. I can kind of read it. Yeah, I'm sure. Wow. Yeah, so like that's like forcing a change. It can't happen overnight. You gotta like it's gotta be restorative, and it has to happen from within everybody. And so that's what happened. And you just like but yeah, I definitely want to talk with you more about that, Brian. Next time you come to Vegas and we sit and drink tea together, I'd love to ask you more about that. The city of Indianapolis once formed the center of the Marion County, Indiana, but in 1969, city's officials sought to merge the city and county governments in order to grow the city's tax base and spur economic growth. The plan faced one large hurdle: the city school district. Historically, Indianapolis public schools had matched the city boundaries, so a city expansion should have merged IPS with the rest of the country's school systems. But officials knew from past political fights that including school districts in a consolidation plan would prompt strong objections from the city's wider, wealthier suburbs. So they cut a deal. The city would get its expansion, but IPS would have to keep its current borders, and the suburban school districts would remain untouched. The legislature wrote the bargain into law, allowing these suburbs to have it both ways, reaping the benefits of city life while preserving the advantages of conferred by their separate school districts. When the Indiana legislature allowed this plan, it conceded something that the suburban communities in Marion County already knew. School district borders have power. In almost every state, a substantial portion of district's funding is drawn from local property taxes. And that's why, yeah, the solution here is not about trying to like erase those lines. Just like the solution to racism is not telling our kids that race doesn't exist. Because like, as of now, it does. And the only way it's not going to exist is like very deeply rooted change that needs to happen. So, yeah, that's why I'm not a big fan of this like forced desegregation of schools. It's hurting everybody in the end. Under the system, school district borders serve a dual purpose. They define both the student population served by the district and the property tax base that supports it. The border therefore determines which kids have access to what educational resources. This sets off a vicious cycle. Greater property wealth in some districts supports higher school spending. Families seek to live within the borders of districts with well-funded schools, and demand for those areas raises home prices, further boosting property tax receipts and school budgets in affluent areas. The results is that our school funding system works to divide communities by wealth, and school district borders entrench those disparities. States recognize that a property tax-driven system will produce unequal funding, and in response, most have tried to compensate with aid formulas that send more state support to districts with lower property values. These policies fall short of actually bringing about funding equity, though because states rarely do enough to keep high-spending districts from ramping up their local dollars past what the state provides for low-wealth districts, state funding formulas treat the symptoms but not the disease. The best state efforts will continue to be outweighed by local funding disparities as long as school district borders support much greater funding levels in some districts than in others. School district borders could be drawn specifically to bring about fairer funding, but no state has taken up this charge. In fact, school district borders are rarely systemically drawn at all. Instead, our school district map is a reflection of the political and economic forces that have shaped states and communities over time. Sometimes the powers and the interests at play affect whole states or regions. For instance, in northeastern states where town governments have historically held considerable power, most state districts still fall along municipal boundaries, reinforcing that authority. Meanwhile, in the South, where past segregation regimes required school districts to be large enough to encompass separate and unequal black and white school systems, many districts are still drawn broadly at the county level. In many cases, though, district borders are the product of narrow circumstances, specific communities seeking to advance their own individual interests. This can take the form This can take the form of holding onto borders in order to preserve existing advantages, like Indianapolis's suburbs did in 1969. It can mean wealthy districts merging with each other, consolidating their positions while leaving behind lower wealth school systems, as well-off districts near San Antonio did in the 1950s. By the way, Brian, check out my new tea display dish. Here's the tea. I painted this. It's like a little dish. It's kind of hard with the filter. Let's see. Maybe I'll go to this one. Here's the tea. Divisive borders are incentivized by the school funding system, but they're made possible by the laws that govern school district organization. These policies set the terms by which students are assured access to schools and resources or are not. For example, a school district's financial struggles can put its students' educations at risk. But only 8 states have any requirements that newly formed districts have any particular level of fiscal capacity. Relatedly, only 2 states have requirements concerning the levels of racial or socioeconomic diversity within a district's borders. That lack matters a great deal in a system where there are often deep divides between the districts in terms of both revenue and student demographics, and where predominantly non-white school systems see measurably less school funding. Meanwhile, borders can be changed all too easily to advantage those with power and influence because there is often no review required by a higher authority when communities pursue on-the-ground changes. School districts mergers only need state approval in 31 states. Neighborhoods in 5 states may secede from their school districts with ever needing state authorization to ensure that the welfare of the students left behind is properly considered. Yeah, so that's the tea. That's the tea. Yeah, I like it too. This is my new favorite. My new favorite teaware. I could make more, you know. I could make more. If people start really liking them, maybe I'll make more and can sell them. Or we could do a party, you know, because this place where I made this, my friend just opened this business. It's like a paint studio. So they have like all these different shapes, ceramic shapes, including teacups. They have like these small teacups that. Or we could do a party, you know, because this place where I'm. They have small teacups, they have like teapots and bigger bowls, plates, different things, and you just like paint them. They have all the different colors of paint. They even have like these smaller little pens that you could do this more detailed stuff. And it's just like a hangout, you know? We can drink tea and hang out. And then they glaze and fire them. They've got kilns there, they glaze and fire them. It's really nice. This reminded me of the Twitch logo. That's why I made it like this. Oh, that's funny. The tea is unreadable because it's green. Yeah, next time you come, Brian, we should go there. We should make a party there. This was only $10 to do. It was only $10. Of course, you have to put in the effort to paint it. But it's fun. We could have a party. All right, TikTok. I'll see you later. See you later. That's interesting. Streaming to TikTok has been an interesting experience so far. I do get a lot of people that come through, but like they don't stay, not even for like more than a couple of seconds. So I don't know how effective, like I built up a TikTok community so I could stream there and try to drive people to the Twitch channel. But no one just like sticks around and actually, a lot of people came. I think Reddit's the best. Reddit's the best. Hi Shyla, good to see you. Hey Don! Hey Don, I want to show you something cool I just got. Oh, I think you saw it on my Facebook post, but this is my newest teaware. I love it. Here's the motherfucking tea. I'm spilling some tea on desegregation in our school districts today. Pretty heavy subject. But I gotta go now. I've gotta go now. Gotta go eat some food with my friends. I was gonna go exercise, but I guess I'm gonna go eat food. I was all stoked on getting some exercise this afternoon, but I guess I'm gonna go eat food. Maybe I can get some exercise after the food. I doubt it. Look at this guy. Look at this guy. He is such a little... Oh, I hope you had a good doctor's appointment, Dawn. Yeah, it's interesting, Dawn. I don't know if you have any interest in, like, our desegregation. Well, first, segregation. So I read an article in pretty great depth about, like, the history of why there is, like, systemic segregation going on still, like, as far as, like, housing communities go. And then looked at how that affects our school systems. And then some of the, like, kind of reverse racism that we feel. Oh, good. I'm happy to hear that your doctor's appointment went well. Yeah. I'm happy to hear it. Well, I think, yeah, I'm gonna go so I can, maybe I'll get a little exercise. In. But I will see you all. Oh, please tell me, what should I think about? Let me know what I should think about. I love thinking about things. All right, I'll see you Instagram. Bye. Oh, that's interesting. That is something to think about. So Dawn says, a big issue in the herbalist community is holding herb conferences and segregating classes based on color and sexual orientation in the hopes of being more inclusive. Yeah, I bet that's heated. I don't understand, like, what that's about. Why would segregating be inclusive? Wouldn't, like, not even bringing up the concept of segregation be more inclusive? Because, like, the reason why desegregation in our education system is even relevant, is even a thing, is because we had segregation in the first place. When it comes to segregation, or when it comes to herbalism, like, these are adults, like, for the most part. These aren't, like, children going to a school within their local community. Oh, I understand. They want to provide safe places for people of color and the LGBTQ community. Well, I don't know. I mean, I think that, like, the most appropriate person to talk about that would be the people involved in that. So it has been segregated. I mean, I guess at this point everything is segregated. I don't know, that's a deep thing, Dawn. I'll have to think about that. Maybe I'll find some stuff online about it too. That could be interesting. Oh, interesting. Yeah, that's silly. So yeah, that's the same thing that I was talking about with, like, these desegregation efforts in the schools end up creating, like, a different level of racism that we never knew before, which is, you know, what the oppressed white people or traumatized white people call reverse racism. No one should ever feel oppressed. I mean, not include inclusion, but to support inclusion, you know, perhaps diversifying, not segregating the classes and creating these safe places, but diversifying the space itself with its leadership, with its instructors, with its content. So that way people can choose with their own consent how they want to engage with it, versus, like, being forced to engage with it through this, like, segregated format. Maybe that could be a solution. I'm sure a lot of people probably found it offensive. God, that's so weird. That's so weird that it worked out that way. And I'm sure if you were to go to, like, the board of that organization that organizes that event, there's probably not a whole lot of diversity on that board. So that would be the first step. And not forced diversity, but, like, genuine, real diversity. And a lot of times the only way to achieve that is a deep cultural change. Oh, Dawn, I'm sorry that you went through that. Thanks. Yeah, my friends just text me to tell me that they're eating right now. I'm like, all right, I'm out. I'm not even going to do that. So I'll get to go work out, which is great. So yeah, I'm going to go home and get that done. But it's been great hanging out with you all. Thank you so much for creating such an open and active space for us to talk about such a, kind of touchy subject. But it shouldn't be touchy. Nothing that we talk about here should ever be touchy. This is all serious, simple things, yet at the same time, not simple. Try to find a place to raid. All right, Dawn, I'll see you next time. Thanks for hanging out. Have a great night. We'll see ya.